So when you're running the numbers, this is what it's actually going to look like. So when you're running the numbers, you're going to look at costs associated with acquiring a property. There's a lot to consider above and beyond, just the down payment, which a lot of people really seem to harp on. So it's important, but there's more issues to be cognizant of, and other costs that you kind of want to plan for ahead of time as an investor. So remember, this is from the standpoint not from a homeowner, but from an investor. So as the biggest difference being when you do, what we're doing here, you're essentially starting a business. You're not buying as a traditional homeowner. Okay, we're going to go ahead and go into it. So here are the numbers. So go ahead and take a quick glance. But what I first want us to look at essentially is, all right. So these are the costs that are needed to acquire a property. So first of all, you're going to look at the earnest money deposit. So it was 24,000. So once you agree on a purchase price with the seller, you provide a good faith deposit that you could potentially lose if you back out at the wrong time, or without a good cause. And there's plenty of opportunities to back out of the deal if you need to. But if you don't back out, this portion becomes pretty much part of your down payment essentially. And then as far as there's closing costs and prepaids to also take into account as well too. So as far as closing costs and prepaids come, I just wanted to mention, thanks to my super cheap and easily affordable student loan debt, he says sarcastically, my debt to income ratio wasn't that great. So even though my credit score was and still is above 800, the bank didn't care. They basically said I had to pay more to essentially buy down the interest rate vis-a-vis, lower my mortgage amount. Hence, this is why the points number you see here, the 16,433, that I was so happy to pay for, is so high in addition to everything else. So essentially, the full cost to acquire the property was 69,277. All right, so it's basically the earnest money deposit amount plus the closing costs and prepaid, which were essentially the down payment amount, the points that you have to pay, which is essentially just like think of it as like a fee, taxes, and then just other miscellaneous fees, like title fees, escrow fees, and things like that. And so going into the next aspect here. So now we'll take a quick look at costs that it actually took me to stabilize the property. So once again, from an investor standpoint, you're going to look at utility holding costs. So those are essentially, electric, gas, water, sewer, trash, basically those ongoing costs while you're actually renovating and trying to rent out the units. So you have to still pay for that stuff and maintain it. And then you're looking at cash reserves as well too. So the cash reserves, about 3 to 6 months worth, is essentially because you still have to pay the full mortgage until you actually finish the renovations and fill the units. So that's just something that you have to take into account as well too. And then you have miscellaneous costs. Now, with miscellaneous costs, that's more or less, those aren't costs that are needed in the early stages. They're more so costs that can come up, and costs that you'll eventually have to pay down the road. So so that's just something to take into consideration. There might be attorney's costs, and then when you do your tax return, and I run conservative numbers, so I always have like a little buffer in there as well too. It's just good to do that as an investor, anyways. And then you look at rehab costs. So essentially, this was the amount that it took me to go through the rehab repairs and everything, which included new appliances, fixtures, furniture, and contract work like electricians, plumbers, HVAC, and I had to do a full garage renovation as well on one of the units. So stuff like that, essentially. And then when you take these 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers and add it to the 69,267, it came out to 115,421. So that was over a good 6 to 8 month period where essentially I had to pull that amount out. So basically when you're going over that process, for instance, with the rehab costs, a majority of those rehab costs I actually had to pay. They were for my regular W-2 income checks for every 2 weeks, and for my investment accounts as well too. So it's like I had to, and also I had to finance a lot of the larger appliances as well too. But basically, I'm living below my means as much as possible to put as much of my disposable income towards the rehab costs and everything to stabilize the property. And that's just one of the things that you kind of have to do. And so I didn't just have this money sitting around in an account waiting for me to put it towards these expenses. It's all about keeping, delayed gratification in mind. It's like that mindset that you have to maintain. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Stanford marshmallow experiment, but it's pretty much the same concept here, where it's, delaying that gratification for the bigger goals over the long term. So after it's essentially stabilized, we can go ahead and take a look at what it would look like from a cash flow point of view.